Well, hello, this is Brian Goulet, co-founder of GouletPens.com, back for part 2 of episode 30 of the Goulet Q&A on using your fountain pens at work. I had way too many questions to fit into a single video, so I broke it out into 2 different parts. I also had to eat lunch in the middle of it, so it was a nice, convenient little break for me, but my belly's all full, and now I'm ready to continue on. So, here we go. Valerie L on Facebook said, I would like suggestions on avoiding inky fingers. I'm right-handed and I always get ink on my middle finger on my Ahab and Esterbrook SJ. I work on carbon paper, so those 2 nibs are good, but they write too wet. Drier ink suggestions or tweaking or nib tweaking that I should try. Okay. Decreasing the flow on these nibs is going to be really kind of difficult. Usually it's only nibmeisters that are able to do that kind of stuff. And if you're using the Ahab with the flex nib that it comes with, that is going to be the reason that it's too wet. Now when you have that flex nib, I don't know anything about the Esterbrook SJ, so I can't really speak about that. The Ahab is a really wet writing pen. It is that way because when you flex that nib out, it needs a ton of ink to continue the capillary action that's required to allow ink flow to go properly out when that nib really spreads out. So it's going to write really wet even if you're just using it normally. Now, one thing you can do is you can swap out the nib on it. You know, Goulet nibs fit it, and Noodlers also has a non-flex $2 nib that will fit that pen, and it writes drier than the flex nib does on the Ahab. So that's one thing I would definitely recommend trying. If you've got a nib that you're replacing, and it's writing too wet, one thing you could always try is heat setting it. I have a video on heat setting a Noodlers Ebonite feed. That is definitely something you can try as well, because if it's writing too wet, it could be because of the way that the feed is set onto the nib. If you have tried those things, or if you don't want to try those things, you could try using a different ink. Pelikan 4001 ink is the driest ink. That's not the Edelstein ink, but they're just the regular Pelikan ink. That is some of the driest writing ink that I've ever used. So they don't have a lot of great colors in it, but it is something that you could try. And then as far as the ink getting on your finger, if you're getting on your middle finger, you're right-handed, that's because of where you're gripping it. So you're probably gripping it too far down, too close to the nib, and your middle finger is touching the fins on the feed and it's getting ink on your finger. That would be my assumption based on what you've told me. So you need to grip the pen further back. It may not seem natural, but that's what you need to do to avoid getting the ink on your finger, unless you want to start wearing a glove or a thimble or something like that. That's going to be your solution. So hopefully that helps you out a little bit. Patrick D on Facebook, I found putting a Quiver on my Webbies to be ideal for keeping paper and pen handy at work. Have you ever considered carrying Quiver products? Okay, so those of you who don't know what a Quiver is, it's essentially a leather pen sleeve of some sort that wraps around various notebooks. I think they make them to fit the Webbies, I don't know what else, a bunch of different journals and stuff. So I had looked into Quiver when they first came out. This would have been 3 or 4 years ago. And I did not find it to be something that I would be able to carry very successfully, just because of some behind the scenes stuff, some logistics and things. I've heard of some people that really like them. I have not heard overwhelming stuff about them one way or the other. I've never used one myself. The idea seems intriguing, but for me, there were just some, businessy things from the back end that I would need to work out in order for that to happen. So, if anybody is interested in those, I could use some feedback on them. I would be open to exploring them. I don't have any fundamental, things against Quiver or anything. I don't really know them that well, but I'd be open to learning more. Scott Y on Facebook, hi Brian et al. Thank you for doing what you do. Contacting and purchasing from you guys has always been a pleasure, and your good vibes has only strengthened my love of fountain pens. Well, thank you. I normally cut out those kinds of gushing comments. I forgot to do it on this one, though, just because I try to make the questions as concise as possible. But anyway, thank you. Recently at work, I was using a Noodlers Ahab, and it got very scratchy and was producing very low ink flow. I took the barrel off and tried to prime it, but got ink splattered all over my desk and spent about 20 minutes cleaning. Any tips for priming at work with Noodlers or any style pen? Thanks. I'm sorry to hear that. That's tough. So yeah, you could use the, the window cleaner or whatever that was recommended earlier. So, okay, yeah. Basically, what I suspect probably happened in your situation is you're at work, you're using cheap paper. Probably what happened is the cheap paper is generally more fibrous. It's not coated with anything really to make it any smoother. So what probably happened was, especially if you're talking about the Ahab, if you're using the flex nib on the Ahab, that nib is going to be softer writing. The tines are going to flex out with less pressure than it would with a conventional nib. So probably one of the tines dug into the paper a little bit as you were writing on the cross stroke, dug up a little bit of paper, and it got stuck in the tines. And so that paper fibers kind of got stuck and caused the tines to misalign a little bit, or caused it to, be wedged apart so that you felt more of a scratchiness as you were writing. So that was probably what actually happened. And then, flooding it maybe helped, maybe could flush some of those paper fibers out, but sometimes may not. That's the reason I have the little brass sheets. If you look at the Goulet brass sheets on gouletpens.com, I've got a video on how to do the brass sheet, basically flossing the tines with a very, very, very thin sheet of brass. That's what that's for, is to get paper fibers and junk out of the slit of the nib, which is exactly what I suspect probably happened in your situation. If you had that, you just do that, and then you could keep on writing, and it probably would have been just fine. Another thing you could do is if you have a loop handy, maybe you don't want to keep one of those at your desk, maybe you do, they're not super expensive, but you get a loop, and then that would allow you to inspect to see if your tines are misaligned or something like that. With an Ahab though, those tines can get misaligned all the time, but they're pretty springy, so that's not as big a deal, because when you start writing with it, they'll kind of align themselves. Usually it's a bigger deal with a stiffer conventional nib if the tines are misaligned, because then it'll feel scratchy in one direction as one of the tines is dropped lower than the others. But that's something that you can inspect as well. And then, flooding like that normally doesn't spill quite that bad. The Ahab is kind of a different pen just because of the way that feed is designed. The feed itself doesn't hold a lot of ink. It's got this huge wide ink channel that allows ink to flow down through the pen, but it does not have these really deep fins that hold a ton of ink like some other fountain pens do. So when you go flooding the feed on an Ahab, it's going to cause gushing to happen a lot sooner than it might on another pen. Plus just the nature, the piston on that thing, it holds a lot of ink. It holds almost 2 milliliters of ink in there as it is. And when that piston is, sometimes it could get a little stuck and you push it and it can gush out, and it's going to cause spillage more than it would be likely to do so on another pen. So one thing that you can try is, I don't know if you had it where it was kind of stuck and then you had to push it to get it started. That's more of an issue before they were using the double wall O-rings, but when they were using the single O-rings. So if you have an older Ahab, maybe that's the situation you're running into. But one thing you can do is take the piston rod and twist it a little bit to kind of break the seal, and then push it down. It should push down smoother. That way you're not like trying to force the piston to start moving, and then all of a sudden it just gives and shoots out a ton of ink out of the tip there. So those would be my recommendations for your situation for next go around. But now that you've done that once, another thing that could really help is you have a paper towel or something like that, or a tissue or whatever. Just kind of take that and like bunch it around the nib, so that when you're forcing ink through, if you do get a spillage or something, it's not going to just blurt out everywhere. You're going to catch most of it. Winnie U on Facebook. What is your favorite highlighter ink? I think that's the shortest question I have today. My favorite, I don't have actually a ton of experience using highlighter inks. I've done swabs of them and I've used them just a little bit, but I don't highlight a lot of things personally. But my favorite of all of them is probably Noodlers Firefly. It's because it's just a conventional like yellow, highlighter ink. It performs well. It just is pretty low hassle. This is just the one that I like the most. Other people like other ones, so I don't know. Brandon D on Facebook. Let's see here. I love you. I've loved Goulet pens ever since I got my first pen in the fall. You guys have been a tremendous help, except for all the pens I want to buy now. Sorry, I'm not sorry. I'm a college student working at internships this summer. I'm looking for a pen in the $100 and below range that is professional looking, but also stand out looking and will impress by my employers. And off of that, any inks or notebooks to pair with that are professional looking as well. Yeah, I mean, definitely getting a nicer pen is, as you're looking for employment, especially in today's market, it's probably not going to hurt you unless you overspend. You know, I think you can get a professional looking pen without breaking your bank, especially, you know, if you're coming out of school, you probably don't have a lot of money. At least I know I didn't when I graduated. So $100 range. Okay, so I kind of took that and thought of some recommendations for both pens and, you know, paper, ink kind of things. So, you know, first off, I'm going to give you kind of a range on the pens. I didn't give you like a $100 pen to choose, though you could certainly do that. But I'll give you some of the ones that I think are some of the best bang for the buck. Okay, so the one you're probably sick of me hearing about at this point is Pilot Metropolitan. I'm a big fan of that. There's some animal print colors that might be a little too wild, but if you go with the black, the silver, or the gold, the conventional colors, you know, it's a $15 pen, comes with a converter, accepts Pilot cartridges as well. It's a fairly plain kind of I'm not going to say you're going to like turn a lot of heads with that pen, but it's going to be like, oh, this is not a Bic Click pen or something like that. This is a pen that you've intentionally purchased and you're using. I think it would get kind of that impression across, unless you're like really going for like a high status job. It's going to get the message across that you really care about what you're using without spending a lot of money. Along the same lines, I think Jinhao has some fairly nice looking pens. You know, like the Jinhao 159 looks a whole lot like a Mont Blanc 149, which is like a lot more money. I think it's about almost 100 times the price. So yeah, it's definitely an option there. Schaefer 100, that is a pretty professional looking pen. It's got a little bit of flash to it, but not too much, and that's in the $45 range. The Parker Urban, or the IM, you know, Parker's pretty middle of the road professional pen, $50, $60 range. The Monteverde Prima, or the Intima, those are both pretty solid looking pen, nice attractive pens too they definitely don't look like your normal pens. Those ones are, you know, have the acrylic look to them. So they're going to be kind of pearlescent and have some shininess going on. They will be a little more poppy, you know, a little more catch your eye kind of thing in the $50 range. As far as paper goes, you know, I think something professional looking would be good. A bound journal is always nice. You know, I don't have any portfolios or anything to recommend. You know, portfolios are never a bad idea if you're carrying resumes and stuff around anyway. You know, portfolio might be able to fit a Rhodia pad or something in there. Might be a nice touch. Or if you want to go with like a bound journal, you could do something like the Quo Vadis Habana or the Rhodia Web Notebook. You know, you can get both of those in black covers. They look just pretty straight-laced and professional. Then ink, I don't know that it really matters, because I don't think that, you know, unless you're writing on something and giving it to a potential employer, I don't know that they're even really going to see the ink that you're using. Maybe they will. Or if you're filling out like a job application or something, maybe it would. I don't know. So, but even still, it's best to stick to darker, more muted colors. I would say probably blacks, blue blacks, you know, dark browns, purples, greens. You know, you can go a little bit wilder on the colors if you're trying to kind of make a statement and maybe have it be where it stands out a little bit more if that's what you're going for. But I would still stick to the more muted colors. And then, you know, as far as black inks go, Noodlers Black, Heart of Dark, X Feather, those are all solid blacks. They look nice and they will generally perform really well on cheaper paper. So if you're filling out an application, you don't know what kind of paper you're going to be dealing with, those would be kind of a safe bet. All right, Adrian C. on Facebook. 3 important considerations for my choice of ink in my line of work are, number 1, bulletproof or eternal type qualities in my ink to prevent forgeries, and 2, color other than black to be able to distinguish the original versus a copy of the document. 3, however, I'd like to stand out from the usual blue ink signatures with another dark color that is still professional looking, not a pure blue ink. Although I'm particular to purple or purple black, I'm open to other suggested colors. Any ink recommendations to fit the bill? Okay, so I know this is kind of similar to the first question that I had in the part 1, but this one you had the added little criteria here of the bulletproof or eternalness. So you're looking for a permanent ink as well. Okay, so I get that. You're going to go with Noodlers ink. I mean, just they're the only ones that have any kind of decent range of permanent inks. Okay, so it's almost not worth looking anywhere else. Noodlers, if you go to gouletpens.com and you go click on Noodlers and the bottled ink, you can do a drop down of Find by Ink property, and you can select bulletproof. And that right there is going to give you a filter of all your options of bulletproof Noodlers inks. And you can pick from there. We've got swatches and everything, so it's really nice. Some of the ones that I might recommend, number 41 brown, that's a brown color, obviously. 54th Massachusetts is a blue-black. I'm not sure if that's in the range you're looking for, but I'll just throw it out there. It's a great ink. Kung Na Cheng is a kind of a darker purple. Lexington Gray, it's kind of black, but it's definitely different. It's lighter in color, so gray. Noodlers Liberty's Elysium. That one is going to be a much brighter, punchier blue. Whaleman Sepia is kind of a sepia, well, it's a sepia color, so it's kind of a brown, lighter brown color. And then there's a bunch of others on there too, some of the wilder, you can get some pretty wild colors if you want in some of those UK and Russian colors. But that would be what I would check out. All right, Berk F on Facebook, what are some ways to keep our pens safe? I don't know the context of what you're asking here, Berk, but you know, I would say if you have a beware of dog sign, you could put that up on your desk. Maybe a mouse trap in the desk drawer if people keep on sniping your pens. No, I'm kidding. Maybe a fireproof box or something. I don't know. I don't know the nature of the question you're asking here, but I would say, you know, I don't know if you're talking about like storing, like people snagging your pens, or if it's like as you're carrying them around. So, you know, those ones are kind of a joke, but, you know, I would say keeping them in a pen case. You know, I've recommended the slip in part 1 of this video, the leather slip. I really like that for carrying it around. I actually keep some of my more expensive pens in a leather slip in my laptop case so that they're not all clanking around into each other and stuff. You can also go with a pen case like this if you've got several pens. You know, then that kind of keeps them all together. That's my little Lamy case there. So that's another good way to go. Another thing is if you only have like 1 or 2 pens, you can always keep it in the box that the pen comes in, if the pen's coming in a box. So that would also kind of keep your pen safe. You know, some boxes are nicer than others, so you may want to like display it up on the shelf, or you may want to tuck it away into a drawer. That's totally up to you. But I hope that answers your question there. Jonathan K on Facebook, what would a good pen or ink combo, wait, okay, your question is confusing me, but basically what's a good pen and ink combo that would be for high gloss paper? Okay, this is one where you really have to kind of use your judgment, okay, and you may have to do some experimentation because it's going to depend how high gloss. If you're talking like a glossy postcard or like a photo paper, you're not going to have any luck with any fountain pen ink, pretty much, because water-based fountain pen inks need to absorb into the paper to some degree, okay? The only exception to that is you have pigmented inks, okay? So platinum carbon black, platinum pigmented blue, pigmented rose red, and pigmented sepia. Those are 4 inks that are pigmented inks. They dry more on the surface of the paper as opposed to absorbing in. They're pigment-based inks instead of dye-based inks, which is what just about all other fountain pen inks are, is dye-based. So pigmented inks will work better on higher coated, you know, more coated, glossier paper. However, if it's truly glossy paper, even those are only going to work but so well. So you may have to experiment a little bit. Otherwise, you would need to get something like a Sharpie pen or some kind of solvent-based thing, or something that is a completely different formulation that's made to dry truly on the surface of your writing surface. Richard F. on Facebook, is Goulet planning on carrying professional portfolio covers for business use? I haven't actually gotten asked a lot about that. I've kind of always had that in the back of my mind, just because I know that we have, you know, a number of working professionals or whatever that shop with us, but I haven't really had people ask me about it before. You know, I think because it's, I don't know. I honestly don't know why a lot of people haven't asked, but, you know, you asked. So I will say that we are, you know, Filofax is a company that distributes Lamy. And so, you know, we are Filofax retailers. So we have access to some of the Filofax products. They're a popular, you know, organizer kind of company, especially in Europe. And so we can get some of this stuff. I've never really explored it before, so I kind of don't really know what I'm talking about with that kind of things. But if there's demand for it, you know, post in the comments. I'm happy to see what kind of stuff you're interested in, or if you know kind of what you're looking for, I can seek that stuff out. But it's not something I've said like, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to go and pick this kind of stuff up. I would look for kind of a gauge on what the demand might be before I'd go diving in that direction. Lira M on Facebook, are there any other covers that fit the Stillman and Burns size journals? Are there any notebook covers that protect the pen instead of leaving it exposed like the Midori clip? Well, Quiver was one thing that was kind of thrown out there earlier here. That would be something that would protect the pen. That's not really a notebook cover though. I mean, we carried some Sula Jane and Earl products. That's, a custom, leather cover maker that has a couple of journal covers that will also accommodate a pen. But not Stillman and Burns size, especially. I don't know anybody that makes a Stillman and Burns size journal cover. There might be some custom ones out there, but that would probably be the route that you'd need to explore in that case. Rebecca C. and Michelle L. on Facebook had kind of similar questions, so I kind of lumped them together here. I use a lot of Post-its at work. Is there a particular type that works well with fountain pens, and what sort of ink or pen combo works well with them? So I do not know of a particular brand of Post-it or sticky note or whatever that works really well with fountain pens. There may be some out there. In fact, I meant to do a little more research on this before the Q&A, but I just did not have time. So I'm afraid I do not have a great answer for you there. Maybe somebody else does, and you can post in the comments, that'd be great. But I don't know. So the one thing I can say is whatever Post-its you're dealing with, you want to go with the finest nib possible, because the Post-its I found are particularly absorbent, okay? So you want to go with the finest nib possible and an ink that is not completely gushing all over the place. And you want to stay away from quick drying inks too, because those are super absorbent. Probably stay away from a lot of permanent inks, because those also tend to be a little more absorbent sometimes. So you want to stick to just more conventional inks. So yeah, finest nib possible, maybe a Japanese fine or extra fine nib if you can. As far as the inks that work well, Noodlers X Feather, Noodlers Black, those both just tend to perform pretty well in general with absorbent paper. Rob P. on Facebook, I've been having a lot of difficulty finding a weekly planner. The Rhodia planner looks like it would be a great fit for my needs, but I cannot find any updated versions for 2014 to 2015. Are there any other fountain pen friendly planners you might suggest? Okay, so there is this whole other world of planners out there. Quo Vadis makes a ton of planners. We really don't deal with them very much because it's just not our scene, okay? You can go just head first into planner world. And if you go to quovadisplanners.com, you can see what kind of planners and stuff are out there. They got a lot of stuff. So you can find like who actually deals with the planners there. I think they have a bunch of retailers listed on their site. But you're at a weird time of year here to be looking at planners for 2014 because we're 5 months into the year. Typically with these kind of specialty planners like this, people are ordering these as soon as they become available. Usually they become available like the end of the summer or maybe early fall the year before they come out. And a lot of times retailers won't stock huge quantities of them because if you think about it, they basically have an expiration date on them. So they'll only make a certain number of them. Depending on what the demand is, they may have them all year and then they expire and they have to be returned back to the manufacturer, or they may sell out in 2 weeks and then that's it. And that was the only run they planned on making. So that was, you're out of luck. So the hardcore planner people like wait for them to come out, get them as soon as they come out, and then that's it. Then they have them for the following year and they get them like 3 or 4 months in advance before the planner even starts. As far as Rhodia goes, they come out with theirs like mid to late summer. Okay, so you're still a couple of months away from 2015 coming out. Now, they used to have a academic planner, so it would start in July of 2014, go to July of 2015. They've actually stopped making the academic planners just this year. So they had academic planners last year. They are not doing them. Rhodia is not doing them this year. Just wasn't enough demand for them, I don't think. So they're only doing the annual ones now, and you would need to try to find a retailer online who has 2014 annual planners. And I don't know who would still have them. We carried them, but we sold out of them, before Christmas even rolled around. So I don't know where you could get them, but it would have to be, they're not making them anymore, so you would need to find a retailer that still has them. Yeah. So Jennifer B. on Facebook, your question was, what are some affordable options for those of us on a budget? I'm especially interested in flex nibs. I love line variation and wouldn't have to be stuck with a music nib I don't like. $40 would be an out-and-out splurge on a single pen. Ditto for notepads or paper. Also, what are the best pens for getting kids started? I have a daughter who really loves art, and I've been thinking about picking up some X-Feather and a Preppy or two to start her out. Well, as I'm reading this now, I'm realizing this has nothing to do with using your fountain pens at work, and I probably should have bumped this question next week on the open forum, but since I've already read it, I might as well go ahead and answer it, Jennifer. So, okay, so if you're looking for flex pens, Noodlers flex pens are by far the obvious choice for affordable flex pens, because your other option is something like the Namiki Falcon, which is $144, or you go with something vintage, and you can spend as much as you want on vintage flex pens. So the Noodlers Ahab would kind of be like my go-to. It's a big pen, it's easy to control. You can get the Noodlers Nib Creeper for $14. That is a smaller pen, might be okay for kids, but kids and flex pens, I don't know. That usually takes a bit of practice. If it's going to be their first pen, it's probably not going to be the best choice. But the Noodlers Ahab, it's a $20 pen. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy it. As far as the kids go, the Lamy Safari is a great one. Lots of fun colors, good solid writers. If they're responsible and not going to lose the pen, you know, that pen is a little closer to $30, so you want to make sure that they're going to take care of it. But some other ones, if you just want to get them into it and see how they do, Pilot Varsity is a great one. $3 disposable pen. They don't have to fill it or anything like that. They can just use it and try it out. And if they break it or lose it or don't like it, you're not out a lot of money. If you're looking at doing some like art and calligraphy type stuff, the Pilot Parallel might be a fun one to try. That one is, you know, like $12 or something like that. It's pretty affordable. You can really have a lot of fun with that one too. And then the Schaefer VFM. That one is a cartridge-only pen. It takes standard international cartridges, and normally I wouldn't push cartridge-only pens, but that works really well for a lot of kids because it's easy to just, you know, pop a new cartridge in. You don't have to worry about filling and stuff because that's when you usually get ink messes. And they got a lot of fun colors too. So those are some suggestions for you on that one. We're nearing the end here, folks. TNC on Facebook. Hi, Brian. Which of the bulletproof inks are the most resistant against solvents like alcohol? I use alcohol hand rubs quite frequently at work, and they sometimes come into contact with the paper that I've written on. Have you considered testing alcohol in your drip tests in addition to water? Well, actually, yeah, hand sanitizer is actually a pretty good trick for removing ink off of your fingers a lot of times, or at least removing most of the ink. That's a good trick. Also, you know, this isn't related to your question, but shampoo works pretty well, and toothpaste I've also heard works. That's kind of a different thing, but yeah, so you're asking me what is going to hold up against alcohol. Okay, so pretty much you're looking for a bulletproof ink, a Noodlers Bulletproof, because anything else is pretty much not going to withstand alcohol that I know. I mean, you might find some inks here and there that'll hold up to it, but I'm not really certain of any ones beyond the Noodlers Bulletproof ones. So Noodlers Black is probably going to be, you know, really resistant to it. Now, the one thing I will say about, you know, these inks is that they are cellulose reactive, and so the Noodlers Bulletproofs, they are not going to bond until they actually hit the cellulose in the paper, okay, or cellulose in your clothes or whatever. You know, on your fingers and stuff, it's going to wash off a little easier than it would if it absorbed into the paper. So when you first start writing on the paper with these permanent inks, you might be able to, if you write something relatively fresh and then you have like hand sanitizer all over your hand and you rub it and stuff like that, you're probably going to be able to smear it pretty good, but you're not going to be able to remove it completely. And if you let the ink sit in there for a long time and all the ink really soaks in there and creates that bond with the cellulose in the paper, then after time it's not going to be affected by the alcohol. The Noodlers Warden series is another one, so that includes Bad Green Gator, Bad Blue Heron, Bad Black Moccasin, Bad Bad Belted Kingfisher. So that is something you can explore as well, those inks. And you asked if that's something that I would consider testing in addition to water. Probably not, because I think you're the first person ever to ask me in the 5 years I've been doing this to test the ink for impermeability against alcohol. So I get enough criticism already for like, why does it even matter that it's water resistant, let alone alcohol? So that's something that you're unfortunately just gonna have to test on your own. So I would say get some samples and try it out. And you know, since you pretty much are looking for these bulletproof inks anyway, it's not too many inks to have to test. Two more questions. All right, Martha S. on Facebook said, what is a good smaller size notebook to take into meetings at work? I have those small steno pads, but that means I must use a fine nib, and it isn't as awesome as my Lamy 1.1 italic nib, which looks gorgeous on paper. Okay, so what I end up using, honestly, just personally, I've got a Midori Traveler's Notebook that I like, but that's a little small. That's more like if I'm going out somewhere. If I'm just going to a meeting kind of in the building here or whatever, or just taking notes at my desk, I use the Clairefontaine top wire bound C8666. That's the product code, if you will. The reason I like this is because it's still a steno pad type, so top wire bound, folds over nicely. I can put it on my lap, I can carry it around, whatever. Very, very ink resistant paper. My ink looks awesome on here. I can use whatever nib I want and it looks great. It's got 8mm ruling with no margins or anything to get in the way. It's micro perforated so I can tear the sheets out or just flip them over if I want to keep all my information together. So it's really handy, and with the 8mm ruling, you got plenty of space here to use a 1.1 or even a 1.5 probably if you wanted to, and you can rock and roll on this thing. So I really like this one. It's about it's 5 3/4 by 8 1/4, so it's a nice size. And then Rhodia has also got a couple of wire bounds that are about that size as well, that are both lined and graphed, so you can check those out too. Last question, David V on Facebook said, I have converted 2 colleagues from rollerballs, excuse me, ooh, there's my lunch. I've converted 2 colleagues from rollerballs to fountain pens. Nice work, David. Can you share some ideas how to promote our awesome hobby at the workplace? I know I always get tons of compliments and questions when coworkers see my pens. Well, that's pretty awesome, first of all, and you're not getting, a lot of glares and mocking remarks. So that's really cool. I find that to be the case mostly, especially, me and my workplace here, obviously, everybody likes pens, so I always get oogles over the pens that I carry around. But, when I go other places and have meetings with other business associates and things like that, it's very seldom that I get a negative reaction around the pens. Usually everybody just thinks it's so cool and wants to talk about it and learn about it, and it becomes a point of conversation, especially because I'm in that business. I would say, a good way to to just get the conversation started is to just have a pen that you're comfortable people trying. If you know that you're going to be in an environment where people are going to ask you a lot of questions about pens, don't carry the rare vintage pen that you have that you can't replace, that you don't want anyone to even look at. Carry around a pen if you're around a lot of people and you know that you might get questions about it. Carry a pen you would be okay with somebody taking or writing with. That just personally me. I think that part of the cool thing about the fountain pen hobby is that, everybody can start into it. You know how to write, you know how to use a pen. Here's a fountain pen, with some 4 seconds of instruction. You can understand how to hold the pen properly and you can write with it. And it's just kind of, it's a very accessible kind of entry into the hobby for somebody who doesn't know anything about it. So that's a really good way to introduce them into it. If you have this really expensive pen or just pen you just don't like to want people to write with or whatever, it can be kind of a turn off. And, that's okay for some people. Some people it's a status thing and they are completely just turned off from the idea of anyone else writing with their pen. Me personally, I haven't really found that to be the case. And I tend to deal with, I'm more like the everyman pens, so I like the pens that you can share and use and you don't have to treat with kid gloves necessarily. So you can share them and let other people try them out and stuff. That's just me personally. Another alternative is you can just kind of keep an extra pen on hand that you don't mind passing around or that somebody can take or whatever. Pilot Varsity, there it is again. Pilot Metropolitan, those are both great pens that you can loan out to people or let them borrow or just write with for a minute and they can try it out and just get the experience, because even though the Pilot Varsity, for example, is a $3 fountain pen, it's going to write better than just about any other gel or ballpoint pen. So it's still going to get them into the fountain pen writing experience, but without a lot of the more complicated aspects of the hobby. The last thing I would do is get them started. Of course, I'm going to be a little bit self-promotional here because I've spent a lot of time trying to put out these great videos for people getting into the hobby, but I got a Fountain Pen 101 series of videos that you can point them to where they can learn a little bit more if they're interested and want to do so. So, there we go. That was the end of my part 2 of using your fountain pens at work. was a long Q&A. I had to break it into 2 parts because I couldn't even fit into one video. I hope that that's okay for you. You know, whatever, we'll see. If you don't like it, you probably haven't made it this far, and I'm not even speaking to you. So for all of you that did stick it this far in the video, thank you. I know it was a lot of stuff to cover. Hopefully I was able to answer all the questions well. Next week, I'm going to go back to an open forum where I'll just kind of take whatever questions you have. So you can just leave a comment on YouTube, on Ink Nouveau. Hit me up on Twitter, #GouletQA. You can hit me up on Facebook when we ask the question there. Facebook tends to be where we're getting most of the questions these days, so that's really more where I'm going to focus on, but you know, I'm really happy to take them however you want. You can also email gouletqa@gouletpens.com. There you go. So, yeah, that's it. I've got to go, but I'm glad that you watched this video. I appreciate all your comments, all your questions, lots of good stuff. Keep them coming. Subscribe to my YouTube channel because I'm pumping out lots of videos, trying to do this stuff for you guys, and as long as you're watching them, I will keep putting them out. So that's kind of my gauge that I'm using for how I should keep doing these things. So that's all. I hope you have a great weekend. Hope you have a great rest of the week, and right on.